Holy Priest is receiving some changes come 8.1, as with most other classes. The situation is also interesting because Priest is the only class with 2 healing specs. Want to know if Holy will be a good fit for you in 8.1? Then stay tuned, because in today's video we will be covering all the major changes you can expect for Holy Priests in patch 8.1 Tides of Vengeance. Whenever I thought of a healer, Holy Priest was always the first to come to my mind. I mean, what's more iconic as a healer in an RPG than a priest? And what's a more iconic priest team than the one aimed at pure healing powers? Be it from the faith he has in his beliefs, or empowered by the ultimate good entity of the universe in which he operates, in this case the light. But enough about RP, let's actually take a more technical approach to this spec. If you have been playing Holy so far in BFA, you might already be aware of its strengths and weaknesses. In terms of the content that Holy is good for, raiding is probably its strongest suit. With the help of powerful cooldowns and tools able to deal with emergency situations, Holy has been a strong choice for progression raiding. But we cannot talk about its performance without talking about the Priest meta. Even if the meta is based off of 8.0, it's still relevant regardless of the patch we are in. The truth of the matter is, Priest will always have a spec that performs better than the other. There are niches, of course, things that one spec does better than the other. But if you are the Priest and you want to enjoy the content at its highest difficulty that you can approach, you will probably pick the spec that is strongest. But then again, personal preference will always be a factor. So far, the meta has favored Discipline over Holy for most content in BFA. PvP is more or less played exclusively as Discipline. Mythic Plus dungeons are also attuned for Discipline due to the nature of the content, affixes, team composition and tools available for the spec. Raiding is one of the domains that Holy historically performed as an above average healer, with Legion and BFA being very generous in terms of performance. With this in mind, it's safe to assume that Holy will remain a viable healer for raiding, and if you ever want to push content, you always have 2 options to choose from, as opposed to other classes. Let's see what changes Tides of Vengeance will bring to the Holy spec. If you haven't tried Holy yet, you might need to know at the very least the Holy Words mechanic, which is a key factor in making the spec stand out from a gameplay perspective. So there are these holy spells called Holy Words, and the 2 main ones are Serenity and Sanctify. They represent your bread and butter healing tools and come as a 1-minute cooldown, tools that you use to deal with damage. Holy Word Serenity heals your target for 500% of your spell power, and its cooldown is reduced by 6 seconds whenever you cast, heal or flash heal. Holy Word Sanctify is our AoE tool, also on a 1-minute cooldown, healing up to 6 allies in an area for 175% of your spell power, with Prayer of Healing reducing its cooldown by 6 seconds and Renew by 2 seconds. Lastly, we have the talent Holy Word Salvation, which is the raid version of Sanctify, healing everybody in 40 yards for 110% of spell power and applying 2 stacks of Prayer of Mending and a Renew on each target. This is like healing extra with extra healing on top. Since there's a lot of synergy between all of these spells, buffs and nerfs might be a bit hard to judge as good or bad, but let's give it a shot. Well, for one thing, Holy will receive a buff across the board for its spells. The Holy Aura currently sits at 36 extra healing and damage across the board, and 8.1 will change it to 40% bonus. It's important to note this since we have a few nerfs to some spells, but the aura change is there to more or less counteract these nerfs. We have a few buffs to start with when it comes to our spells, and the first one we are looking at is Focused Will. Focused Will is a passive that buffs us for 8 seconds after we take melee hits, with 15% damage reduction. In 8.1, this will stack 2 times, giving us a lot more durability. This passive will most likely be more effective in PvP than PvE, but more toughness is more toughness, so it's always welcome. Heal, our filler spell, is getting buffed as well to restore 175% of spell power, up from the 8.0 version of 160%. Heal is a basic spell that has a long cast time, heals for a big chunk, and costs very little mana. In terms of performance, this is not a priority in most situations, and because of its long cast time, can be inconvenient to pull off at times. The buff to it is either to incentivize its usage throughout a fight, or to simply make our downtime/filler window more meaningful, or it could be both. Renew will also get buffed by a small amount. Renew is an instant cast spell that places a heal over time on the target, while also doing a small initial heal. The initial heal has been buffed to 23% of spell power up from 20, and the heal over time effect has been raised to 115% of spell power up from 100% over 15 seconds. Renew has been at the very end of the priority list and is mostly used during movement phases or to supplement the throughput by a small amount. Now with its buff, there might be extra consideration in using it for throughput but for the cooldown reduction of Sanctify as well. Now let's take a look at the talents, which the ones addressed have all been nerfed. Like I mentioned previously, the nerfs are probably to align the overall performance with the buffs previously stated. So until it will be extensively tested, it's safer to assume that the overall performance of Holy will remain pretty much unchanged. The first talent to take the hit is Benediction, that makes your Prayer of Mending have a 25% chance, down from 30%, to leave behind a Renew once it bounces away. The proc chance has been lowered, but Renew has received the buff twice, both in its individual performance and in the overall Holy Priest aura. I feel this change was made to make the talent feel more impactful. On one hand, you will get it to proc less, but when it does, it feels more significant since Renew is stronger. The second nerf is to Binding Heal, and it's twofold. The actual power of it is reduced to 65% of spell power, down from 75%, and also has its mana cost increased to 2.9%, up from 2.4% of your total mana. Halo is also receiving a small nerf to its heal and damage, and it will deal 103% of your spell power, down from 110%. This is a great change in my opinion, because now I really don't want to pick Halo and pull all the trash in a dungeon. Holy Word Salvation is receiving a much bigger nerf, where its individual heal is reduced to 110% of spell power, down from the live version of 150%. Once again, this is after the aura buff, which makes the nerf less impactful than it seems. It's still a big nerf, but since Renew has been buffed as well, the supposedly 40% spell power loss in its heal will mean less. Lastly, Trail of Light is also getting the stick, with its replicated heal amount being lowered to 35% of the original, down from 40%. Since the aura buff is 4% to the actual spells, this might just be a tooltip fix with the talent operating at the same strength. On the PvP side, when it comes to talents, we have three major changes. Greater Fate is changed to get cancelled when you also take a hostile action on top of its already present effect. Greater Heal is changed from buffing the heal spell to becoming a spell on its own that will heal the target for 65% of their max health. The amount of heal your target will receive is stupid high, but the spell does have a long cast time that gives people a lot of time to interrupt it. The last change is the talent Holy Word Concentration. Again, turns a passive into a spell that blesses the ground to make all allies immune to silence and interrupt effects. This is an interesting change. On live, it just reduces subsequent interrupts and silences by 70% after being interrupted successfully. In terms of Azurite traits, we will say goodbye to Sacred Flame, a trait that buffed Holy Fire to deal more damage and restore mana, in favor of Promise of Deliverance. After casting Serenity for 10 seconds, Heal and Flash will restore more health and reduce the cooldown of Serenity by an additional second. It's definitely a better trait and one that actually plays to the mechanics of Holy. Of course, you will have changes to the general traits that are available for Shadow and Discipline. Twist Magic will be nerfed to heal for a lot less, around 4 times less, when you successfully dispel magic. Also, we have a new universal priest trait that is Death Denied, which will work on Leap of Faith. When you cast Leap of Faith on a target, on top of its normal effect, you'll also place a shield on them to absorb damage. As long as the shield remains, the cooldown of Leap will be 200% faster. This pretty much covers all the changes Holy Priest will get in the beginning of patch 8.1. Changes will most likely happen in the future as well, and when they do, I will make sure to update you guys with whatever is new. If you like this type of content, hit that subscribe button and the bell thingy. YouTube doesn't think it enough to be subscribed. You also need to tell YouTube that you want a notification when we got a new video for you. Should you play Holy in 8.1? Well, if you are already playing Holy, you'll be pleased to know that the meta seems to be more in favor of Holy as opposed to Discipline, so yay! Also, the number changes are again numbers. It's very hard to tell how good Holy will be in terms of top performance. One, because Holy got buffs and nerfs at the same time to spells that synergize with each other. And two, Holy is already topping the meters in raids at a time when Disc will be nerfed and Mistweaver tuned down a bit as well. These two healers being the main contenders Holy had to deal with. So yay again? If you're a new player, Holy is a much easier gateway to healing that you can take. It's fun, but personally I like Discipline more. But if you think Discipline might be overwhelming, then you have a very solid choice in Holy. So yes, play Holy in 8.1. It's good, it's simple, it's efficient, and the only thing you might have issues with is Mythic Plus, for which you can always switch to Discipline and take advantage of its tools. The only real negative thing I have to say is that the new trait seems a bit boring, and yeah, it's not bad, but I feel they added more interesting stuff to other classes. All in all, I had fun playing Holy after so long. Aside from the actual numbers, I did a bit of research for PvE and PvP to get a better feel of what the top players seem to say about Holy in general. All of this is the general opinion present in the priest community, which might be different on an individual level, so let me know what you guys think down below. Thanks for sticking around, and I hope you found the video useful. I wish you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you next time. Peace!